name is Eric Holthouse. I work as the Community Outreach and Engagement Manager. Very happy to be here. Super exciting to see everyone here. And I'm going to turn it over to Lona D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Eric, as always. Hi, everybody. I'm doing an audible today just because I happen to be here today, and I wasn't planning to speak, but I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the City Council as I got the chance to walk around the tables and introduce myself. What I said then, I'll say here as well. It is really, really important that you all know that this is the kind of work that we as a City Council care about as well. So as leaders in our community who are bringing back this information from all of our constituents and highlighting the strategic work that we need to do as a city, this is among the very most important things that we do. So I'm grateful to see all of you here. Thank you for your support on this. You're actually doing the work. We just set the policy in a lot of ways. So we get to take a lot of credit that actually comes from you on the ground. Much appreciated. Very grateful to be with all of you. And I'll turn it over to our Human Rights Commission Chair, Anita Smithson. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Council Member. So good evening, everyone. Yes, my name is Anita Smithson, and I am the current chair of the Bloomington Human Rights Commission. I just wanted to take a moment at the start of our program to thank everyone for coming and to thank my fellow human rights commissioners as well as city staff, especially those in community outreach and engagement, planning, and the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. They put in a lot of work to help us make this event happen, and we're really deeply grateful. So we will have a moderated Q&A as part of tonight's program. I know Eric was coming around with some cards. If you have a question that comes up, kind of give one of us a wave and we'll get you a card. We will take those for the end. And for many of us in the community, we've come to learn about racially restrictive covenants and their legacy through storytelling. We are really grateful and excited to have Daniel Bergin, executive producer at Twin Cities PBS, with us tonight as our moderator. Daniel Bergin creates media that explores diverse people, places, and the past through restorative narratives. The Twin Cities PBS executive producer and WEM endowed director of history has won over 20 regional Emmy Awards for productions ranging from PSAs to feature-length documentaries, including Jim Crow of the North, Out North, Minnesota LGBTQ History, Lost Twin Cities 5, and Make It Okay, Mental Illness and Stigma. His documentary, With Impunity, Men and Gender Violence, was named Best Documentary of 2012 by Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine. The Minneapolis native and University of Minnesota graduate has served as a director on the boards of several community media organizations. Daniel has been an adjunct instructor and lectured and presented in countless schools, colleges, and community settings. He has been recognized as a Minnesota State Arts Board Fellow, a City Pages, like RAP, pour one out for City Pages, right? Bring it back. City Pages Artist of the Year, and was awarded a Bush Leadership Fellowship for his work in community media. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce to you Daniel Bergin. Thanks for moderating our conversation tonight.
Yeah, the bio's a little dated, isn't it? But thank you for calling. No, exactly. It's the power of local media. City Pages was one of the weekly readers, an alternative magazine, and as someone from PBS and who's worked in alternative media, I appreciate that. So hello, everybody. It's really great to be here. Thank you for being here. Thanks for all the great work all of you are a part of in different facets of this work and this story. So I'm looking forward to our conversation in a little bit and having you meet some folks who are doing some amazing work in kind of a range of sectors. And I just wanted to share a little bit about why this is important, in my opinion, the power of, as you read, restorative narratives. And then just maybe watch a little bit from Jim Crow of the North as well. But to start, I was thinking about this community, and I remember I had a sense of early human rights work in the Twin Cities and the metro area. So it was interesting to look back on that era shortly after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, and we know how that rippled through the communities on the south side of Minneapolis. MLK Park, formerly Nicollet Field, was, I believe, the first place in the world to officially be renamed after Dr. King, just months after his assassination. But out here in Bloomington, the nascent Human Rights Commission was already doing great work. I was reading an article about a woman who happened to be white, who was a part of the Human Rights Commission and was working part-time at a construction firm. And when the owner found out, he hollered at her, and she was going to lose her job. And it led to work in the city to prevent reprisals for this kind of work. So it's like the theme tonight that we'll be talking about is how in little ways in policy and in municipalities, we need to and can make change. There was other interesting reporting about, the arrival of this Human Rights Commission. I guess some students from the U of M were speaking at a high school, and used some strong language, but it was just, this really interesting dialogue about what was happening with the Moral Hall takeover at the U, and, those students wanted to come out here and speak to teenagers in Bloomington, and were fairly well received. But just a reminder that, we think a lot about Minneapolis and St. Paul with these issues, and we'll see a little bit of that with Jim Crow of the North, but I think this is a great story that isn't even just a recent story, but that Bloomington has been putting in work in this area of human rights and civil rights and equity for decades. So thank you for that. So I wanted to show a little bit from Jim Crow of the North and just kind of a compendium of some of the different scenes and themes of the film. I hope some of you have seen it. If you have, if you just will bear with me for a few minutes. If you haven't, this is just a short segment, and I would love for you to watch the film in its entirety. And also, talking with Nick about some follow-up stories that we did that follow a little bit of Maria's work that you will learn about here in a little bit, and other things that kind of rippled from the original research from the Mapping Prejudice group. But first, just a few minutes from Jim Crow of the North.
This mob of over 100 people, the newspaper described it as some of the most powerful people in Minneapolis, marched on the Jackson House in October of 1909. They read prepared statements.
It was decided that a large delegation should call upon you to make doubly impressive a fact, namely, that the white residents of this district do not want members of your race domiciled in our midst. We are not here to argue, but to make a perfectly plain statement of our position in the matter, to wit, that we do not want you.
And this was in 1909. I don't think it's any coincidence that in May of 1910, the first racial covenant shows up in South Minneapolis. Covenants can be building covenants, they can be setback requirements, but the racial covenants that we're concerned with tells you who can or cannot live, lease, even occupy certain spaces.
The first map that Penny made was shocking. I was shocked when I saw this, and I was shocked when she started reading me some of the language of these racial covenants.
Chinese, Japanese, Negro, Moorish, Turkish,
Mongolian,
Hebrew, sometimes Semitic.
people of African blood or descent. No Negroes or Jews. Only Caucasians, except for their domestic servants of a different race who might be domiciled with the owner.
Many of them were written during the period where eugenics is at front and center of American scientific thought, and that language is often what you see in these deeds.
Only people of the Aryan race can inhabit this land.
Or the Aryan branch of the Caucasian race.
I think one of the surprising things that I found in this research is 100% of these covenants are aimed at African Americans.
And this is where the term redlining comes into place. The FHA, they made color-coded maps of all the largest cities in the United States, and they broke cities down into 4 different areas. Red is considered hazardous, that's the worst. Yellow is considered definitely declining. Blue is considered still desirable, and green is considered the best. The FHA refused to give an area a green-lined designation. Again, this is the best designation that they'll offer unless, and I'm quoting again, restrictive covenants are already in place. That line's from the FHA underwriting manual. Racial covenants aren't just about discriminating against people of color. It's about enriching white people. And I think that's the part that often gets lost in this narrative. And I think it does speak to the ways that white supremacy have been embedded in really built structures and built environments. I mean, if your grandparents bought a home on Minnehaha Creek, that home's worth, what, $500,000? If your grandparents rented an area that was redlined and then subsequently destroyed by a freeway project, you're not inheriting anything. So even though covenants are now illegal, kind of this yawning chasm of wealth inequality that emerged as a result of covenants is still very much with us today.
So actually, there's some research that was conducted at the U of M, and Mapping Prejudice has kind of pulled some of this together that validates some of what Kevin was describing in terms of the wealth development in a covenanted home versus same home, can even be similar location. The difference is nearby location. The difference is the covenant, and that changes, the equity, the wealth, and then the accumulated wealth development of a property in pretty dramatic ways. So it's very real, and so Jim Crow of the North is a story that is a difficult history, but an important one, and it's had a life in community, and I'm proud of how it's done this, bringing us together in conversation. But as read in my bio, I love restorative narratives that include strength-based storytelling, and so one of the things we're going to do tonight is just that. We're going to share stories and hear stories of folks doing great work and really kind of working in a way that I think is truly restorative on a number of levels. But one thing that's cool with this conversation tonight that I think is, unlike some of the activists and trailblazers, Dr. Josie Johnson, who's featured in a new documentary that we just released, who are these amazing paragons of equity and that kind of work. What I love about this conversation tonight is it's folks doing it, sometimes quietly in city halls or municipalities or law firms, in nonprofit spaces. And in a way, these are the sheroes and heroes we need to talk about as well when we're talking about this kind of work. Because in a way, while the Fair Housing Act or the state's Fair Housing Act, federal and state, 68, 62, those are important kind of bulwarks for equity. But we all know that, and we need more of that state level kind of oversight. But we know change happens locally, and that means us as neighbors, but it also means city planners and city attorneys, and and really caring folks in legal community, and then nonprofit leaders who focused on housing. And so that's what we've got for you tonight, and we'll hear from some of the folks doing that great work and doing it in a way that really is a restorative narrative. So I get to read some bios now of these folks doing this great work, and then we'll hear from them, and then we'll all come together and have a conversation with you all and take some of your questions. Get the cheaters on for this. So I'm really excited to read this bio. Maria Cisneros is someone who we actually worked with, as I mentioned, on some follow-up stories to Jim Crow of the North, and just exemplifies that idea of someone within the walls of a municipality who diplomatically but diligently kind of pushed those systems and made real change, and hopefully we had her back in the community to help her do that. But Maria Cisneros is the city attorney for Golden Valley, Minnesota. She advises the city on development and zoning matters, contracts, policies, procedures, employment matters, and a wide variety of legal questions. Maria is the co-founder of the Just Deeds Coalition and past president of the Minnesota Association of City Attorneys. She holds a BS in International Studies and Spanish from the University of Minnesota, Carlson School of Management, and Juris Doctor from William Mitchell College of Law. Right on. She's from the metro area and lives with her husband and 4 children in a home that had a racially restrictive covenant. Her husband and children are mixed-race Latino, and her family would not have been allowed to live in their neighborhood when their home was built in 1950s. And Maria has been very generous in sharing that, and her husband as well, by proxy, in sharing that story of that discovery that really kind of puts a face and a lived experience on what the covenants can mean and can do, even when they're not enforceable. It was really fun a while back at the Capri Theater on the North Side to meet Shereese Turner. Shereese is the program officer With Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, Shereese leads Programs and Services Division, which includes homeownership development, community outreach, neighborhood revitalization, foreclosure prevention. How do you have time for all this? Foreclosure prevention, post-purchase, and its repair programs. We always think of Habitat as Humanity as just building houses, but there's a lot more community building going on. Shereese is the director of programs and operations, or was at Twin Cities Rise for 11 years. And Shereese is an inspiring, passionate leader who builds bridges with community partners and advocates for underrepresented communities. Shereese says, nothing is more gratifying than sharing your own personal story of homeownership, determination and resilience, stories like most of those that she works on in the housing sector. It is important, she says, to recognize the value of these stories in the field. And Shereese is committed and dedicated with passion to use her skills and abilities in making dreams come true and the transformation of homeownership possible, no matter what your past and circumstances are. She's also the co-founder of the Stop the Violence, Bring the Unity Back movement, right on. Currently serving as commissioner of the City of Brooklyn Park Planning Commission and Minneapolis Advisory Committee on Housing. I'm not done. Shereese has a degree in public nonprofit management and a master's in health and human services from St. Mary's University in the Twin Cities. And Shereese is married with 3 adult children, 3 grandchildren, a canine, and resides in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So we'll hear from Shereese in a little bit. It was amazing when we started Jim Crow of the North, and Kirsten Delegard, the founder of Mapping Prejudice, was a friend. She and her team could not have imagined or dreamed that a legal team would be in the community discharging deeds in real time. It was amazing to see. I had to take a picture to send to Kirsten from Mapping Prejudice, and that's because of Megan Rogers. Megan C. Rogers advises local and national clients on legal and policy issues impacting land use, zoning, real estate, municipal law, regulatory matters, and mining. Before joining Larkin Hoffman, she served as counsel to cities in South Florida and most recently as assistant city attorney for the City of Bloomington, Minnesota. Megan is a trusted advisor on board governance, real estate development, public financing, and transactional real estate matters for both private clients and municipalities. Megan has served as an adjunct professor with Mitchell Hamlin Law School and as active member and panelist with the Urban League Institute in the Twin Cities. Oh, so good to have you here, Megan. I look forward to hearing more from you, and thank you for the work you're doing. And then, I think in the world of this movement, there's nothing cooler than like city planners, like maybe the least kind of dope activist you would think of, or change makers, but without folks really doing that work, I think all the narrative work we've done and the data that Mapping Prejudice has brought together, without looking forward and how does it affect planning going forward, it just doesn't mean the same. So thank you, Nick Johnson. Nick Johnson has worked in multiple roles in the City of Bloomington Planning Division since 2015. He currently serves as the senior planner responsible for long-range planning projects for the City of Bloomington. These projects include the development and implementation of the city's comprehensive plan, district and small area plans, refinement of the zoning code, and other land use and development policies, and other various special projects related to community development, housing, and transportation. Nick's professional passions include demystifying local government so it is more accessible to more people, as well as connecting his colleagues across departments to best achieve the city's strategic priorities. Nick graduated from Grinnell College, Iowa, and with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in history. Oh, well, we should have been talking already. And from the University of Minnesota with a Master's of Arts in Urban and Regional Planning. So this is a great group. I look forward to the conversation we'll have with all of them. But to start, I think, Maria, you're up next, and we have to wake up the computer. There you are.
Well, thank you. It's so great to be here and see all these people here to talk about this topic, because this is why we do this, is to have these discussions to support the folks who are, the planners who are changing the zoning codes and talking about how we can change systems within local government to get the outcomes that we're talking about, and undoing the harm that was done by racial covenants, to the nonprofits that are supporting people directly in the community and raising the money to build the houses that people are going to live in. And I'm going to leave the private law firms out because they're good. But I still love Megan. So it's really, really, it's really kind of heartwarming for me to be here and see all of this, because I'm just a nerd who works in local government. And this all started in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. There were a group of us nerdy local government attorneys who, I happened to be the president of the City Attorneys Association at the time, and some of us got together and were like, we are giving advice to every police department in the state of Minnesota, and we don't talk about equity or racism at any of our conferences. So we need to start doing that, and how are we going to start introducing that? Because we don't have a very diverse group of city attorneys in the state, and we're not going to be successful walking in just starting with policing. So we started thinking about, how is racism and systemic racism embedded in all of the structures we give advice about, including housing and zoning and all of those things? And at the same time, I had recently discovered the covenant that is on my house that is in one of my upcoming slides, and had started a project with the Golden Valley Human Rights Commission, because in Golden Valley, I don't know if you've been there, but we have like 400 lawyers per block in Golden Valley, because we're right downtown, right next to downtown. So I was like, let's recruit some of them, and they can help discharge these covenants. So we had just started it, and we decided we'll just ask the City Attorneys Association if they want to do this with us. And we got people like Megan to volunteer and start doing that work. And then we connected with Mapping Prejudice, Kirsten, who then connected us with Daniel, and with Lyndon here in the second row is one of the co-founders of Just Deeds, which brings me to my slide. We're a coalition. We don't raise money. We don't lobby. We're strictly people coming together to talk about these issues and figure out solutions, and then keep having the conversation to support people that are doing the actual work. Because part of this is for what Kirsten Dahlgaard calls willful amnesia. All of these things happened. And also, it's not hard at all to discover that they happened and to see all the documents. It's just written in black and white, and was in the newspaper, as we saw in that clip. But there's kind of this cultural phenomenon of willful amnesia about these topics, and so we need to resurface them, because the hope is that by understanding how purposefully all of this was done, how purposefully our communities were segregated, and how purposefully we really became a place that has one of the worst disparities, racial disparities in home ownership in the country, then people can learn how to purposefully undo it. And if we're going to undo it, we're going to need as much intention and purpose as was put into putting these systems in place. So we convene people to talk about that, to think about that, and then support people who are out doing those things by coming and talking and saying the things that maybe it's too risky for the city planner to say themselves. So I'll show up and say it. So that's who we are. We have a lot of cities participating. It's a cross-industry coalition, and that's just a beautiful thing, because this all was put in place by all these industries and more. I have another slide that'll show kind of overlap between a bunch of different structures and systems and laws that perpetuate the segregation that we live in today. And all of these industries were involved in putting these systems and structures in place. And so that's why we decided, Kirsten Dahlgaard from Mapping Prejudice connected us all. We're all going to work together to dismantle all of this. And so we have a whole bunch of cities. The cities keep joining. Okay, so this is a very offensive slide. This is the language that was in the covenant on my house. And my husband and I purchased this house in, 10 years ago. And we were living in a condo downtown, and none of our kids knew how to ride a bike. So we were like, let's move to the suburbs. And so naturally, I'm a lawyer, so I moved to Golden Valley. But also, my family's from Golden Valley / Robbinsdale. We've ping-ponged back every generation between Robbinsdale and Golden Valley, which is, right next door to each other, and both border North Minneapolis. And so this is the environment I grew up in, where there's the Parkway, and then there's North Minneapolis, and there's it's very stark, and this history is very starkly illustrated in that part of the city. And so when I accidentally discovered this covenant, reading all the stuff on my property deed, my husband and I had this conversation, do we even want to buy this house? Which was kind of shocking, because my grandparents lived a mile away. And this was one of the neighborhoods that I grew up in. And I didn't know any of this history about this neighborhood. And so that's kind of what sparked my curiosity. And that's part of the reason why we do discharges, because the discharges are largely symbolic. There's no legal effect. The covenants are already legally unenforceable. But I know from my experience and from the experience of a lot of the people that I've helped discharge the covenants that there's something about seeing the language on the particular property that you occupy and then being able to do something tangible to disavow it, or to say, no, thank you, that's not me, and now it's forever in the property records that I said this is not okay and I don't stand for this. So that's why we do the discharges. I don't know if there we go. So here's Mapping Prejudices time lapse of Hennepin County of where the covenants are. The blue is showing where they are. I'm gonna speed up because I wanna give everyone else a lot of time to talk about all of the great work that they're doing, but you can go to the Mapping Prejudice website or the Just Deeds website and watch this. And you can also search on this map for your own property to see if your property has a covenant. So this is I already said all this stuff. This is why we're here, because it sounds like an old thing, and it sounds like we're talking about legal things that don't matter anymore, but they do still matter because they shape a lot of what happens now. And part of how we know that they still shape what happens now, this is a demographic. So the darker the color, the more diverse the population. And then the green dots are the overlay of where the covenants are. And so you can see how the demographic patterns that were created by racial covenants have endured, even though racial covenants have been illegal in Minnesota since the 50s. And so this is a systemic problem that we're still trying to figure out. All the things we need to do to undo those patterns that were created. This is Bloomington. You can zoom in on that in the map that's posted out in the atrium. Another point that I always like to talk about is that this is a system. And so here's an example of the city of Golden Valley requiring covenants to approve a development. And then all those other things are kind of accomplishing these same means, and a lot of times the attitudes and beliefs that underlie all of these other strategies are the same as those that were things that people came to say in favor of racial covenants. And so that's something that we can learn about, and we can learn to identify and interrupt, and then our policymakers can learn and plan how to respond to those things. This is really interesting because to something that Daniel said, just because we pass a law and we make something illegal doesn't mean that the harm that it created goes away. It also doesn't mean that there's not going to be another thing. And so whenever something becomes illegal, then there's just another strategy, and so we need to be vigilant about that. We need to be thinking about what are the new strategies. And maybe Megan will talk a little bit about that. As it relates to, we were talking about redlining, Daniel did, but as it relates to zoning. So this is something really near and dear to my heart, because my job is to uphold these systems and to write these rules. And then also we have to be willing to confront the reality of the outcomes that they produce. So I won't get deep in that. I'll let our planner talk about that. There are a lot of real impacts. And these slides that I'm just kind of spinning through illustrate what those impacts are. I think we can make this slide deck available. But you can also go to the Just Deeds website, and we have a lot of this information on the website, that there's just because we made these things illegal, just because we have people of goodwill scattered about in city halls, doesn't mean that we don't need all of you. We need every single person to take responsibility to undo this history. because it's hard. It's really, there are a lot of people like you all who are here to learn about this, and there are equally a lot of people who are like, I don't think there's a problem. So, that's the point of this, and hopefully you take something away tonight, and you're able to take that back to whatever your sphere of influence is and share that with your sphere of influence, and be inspired to figure out what action you are going to take, what work you're going to support. Okay, so my time is up, and I am going to... Shereese is next. Yes, I will step aside, and then we will be back for the panel.
Well, beautiful faces in the crowd, so thank you for having me, and thank you guys for doing all the amazing work that you're doing. I'll just preface. When I joined Twin Cities Habitat in 2018, I had no idea what this housing sector was all about. I had no idea. I spent a couple of decades in the corporate sector. I had a stint at Twin Cities Rise, I was drawn to Twin Cities Rise because of their mission. And I was there for 11 years, and that was probably some of the most amazing work I've ever done. And then I got to Habitat. And then I realized, oh, my work is not done. Yeah. As a matter of fact, this work is going to be a beast. Because before I joined Habitat, I was on the fence. Like, do I know Habitat? Of course, everybody knows Habitat, the brand. But I really didn't know Habitat. So I went straight to the community, people that I trusted, my mentors, and was asking, what do you know about Habitat? And everybody kept saying, do they work in the Black community? I heard that multiple times. And I remember my mentor saying, Shereese, go to Habitat and find out what's going on at Habitat. And that's exactly what I did. That's what I did. So my first big project was to understand where was these perceptions coming from. So I had my team disaggregate the data. We actually dug into boxes and started filling the files. And it was very clear. I knew exactly what they were talking about. They did not work in our Black community. And what I mean is our foundational Black community. And let me define foundational Black. U.S.-born African Americans who are descendants of the chattel slavery. That's me. That's my family. And I know exactly what our hardships were. I'll also preface, I wasn't born here in the Twin Cities. My hometown is Chicago, Illinois. And it's the most segregated city, if not the most segregated, probably the second in the United States. But I was surrounded by homeowners, professionals that looked like me. So coming to this region, I was shocked because those positions, careers that I thought would be held by people of color, they were not. I remember telling my mom, I don't see any Black construction workers or city workers or bus drivers or I saw none. And the question was, well, what are they doing if they don't have these jobs? That was a reminder to me, something is not right. Something is going on here, and I can't put my finger on it. But by this time, I had a decent job working at a big bank, and then made a transition to another Fortune 500 company. And then our division was relocating to North Carolina, and I could not uproot my children, so I said, I'm going to stay here, because I don't think my work was done here. And I joined a nonprofit, started just by volunteering at Twin Cities Rise. And I remember our CEO, Steve Rothschild, if you ever eaten Yoplait yogurt, show hands, who's eaten Yoplait yogurt? That's Steve Rothschild. That's Steve. He was able to retire at a really young age, and he started this nonprofit called Twin Cities Rise for that very reason that in 1995, I noticed there were no Black people working in their warehouses and manufacturing companies. So that's why he wanted to start Twin Cities Rise. And that's what drew me to that organization. Fast forward, Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. I always wear my workforce development hat. Always. Always. So, let's talk about what I uncovered at Habitat. They did not serve our foundational Black community very well. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna pause here, just give you guys an overview of who we are. I'm sure most of you guys know, but this is our mission. We serve over 1,600 homeowner partners. We do repairs, we volunteer, we have tons of volunteers, we have restores, we have an amazing restores. This is our products and services. We build homes. We are a bank. We do a little bit of everything. But I want to get to this data here. This is what Daniel Maria is talking about. The disparities gap. It's from the redlining. And I want you guys just to sit with this because I've been looking at this report. There's a guide that comes out every year, and it hasn't changed in 20 years. So as much work as we're all doing, we can't do the work the same way that we've always done it. It's insanity because you want to get the same results. So I knew I had to dig a little bit deeper, and we started with our strategic plan. As you can see, yeah, we want to expand home ownership, but we got to have a focus on racial equity right now. While we have our foundation of building partnerships like the City of Bloomington HRA and other partners, because we can't do this work alone. So I just want to say, so what? I started the project by working with Dr. Brittany Lewis, who Daniel worked with, to do an engagement project with individuals who we work with. Those who were successful in our program, so these are homeowners, home buyers, community leaders, but also people who were not successful. And this is what we needed to do. Understand their experience. How are you providing a program and you don't quite understand who you're serving? Make it make sense. It makes no sense. So I love this quote that Dr. Brittany said, nothing about us without us is for us. So it is my mission to build something in collaboration with our community that's going to benefit our community. And that means I need to hear their voices. I need to center their voices. I need to see them. I need to hear them. Shereese can just sit in a room and say, I think I know what we should do. That's not going to work. So we needed to understand the experience, as you guys can see, pain points in the program. One shoe fit all. One shoe does not fit all. You can't just have one program and think everybody's going to be successful because journeys are very different. You have to lead with empathy, understand the individual, build a plan based on that individual, not what you think they should be doing. This is a video. We're going to share this video with the deck. So now what? I had to unlearn the Habitat way. I heard many times, we've always done it that way. Wrong answer. We're not doing it that way anymore. You heard what I said. You keep doing the things you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. And that means not serving our foundational Black community. You can't be okay with just doing easy work. We found out that it was easier for us to work with individuals that didn't have any credit than to work with those who have challenges with credit. I think we can work with all of them, right? So we built a special purpose credit program. And I have to also share that it's a race-based special purpose credit program. Yes, all banks use special purpose credit programs, but we had to understand those who we were leaving behind. Our data showed that we left people behind. So the attorneys, I love attorneys, they said, you got a case. You can build a race-based product because your data proves that you've left folks behind. And that's what we did, and we're so proud of this work. Yeah. So the what is all of this? We talked about this, right? I'll go through that. I also want to just skip through because we can share all of the toolkits so you guys can learn more about this. But this is our data. This is what I led with. Our second largest applicant had the least success. No good. So what I had to do, I'm going to just move forward because I'm running out of time here, build a program that's going to work for them. And guess what? If I build a program that's going to work for them, it's a win for everybody. Because guess what? Everybody else is winning. So that's what we were able to do. We've seen some major success. This is about DPAs. I won't go into all the details about that. But, you know, if you want to learn more, there is that information. But I like to celebrate the small wins. You see that? When you make changes to your program, when you understand who you're working with, when you lead with empathy, when you dig in deep and understand the data, you can see success. We went from 8%, and guess where we are right now? In less than 2 years, 30%. So don't tell me, systems, we got a system. I'm sorry, systems are people. When you change the people, you learn new things. That's why you have to have leaders with lived experiences. Habitat didn't even understand that I got black skin. We all got the same journey. Wrong. Journeys are very different. You have to understand who you're serving. Build a model that's going to work for those who are most marginalized. And guess what? It's a win for everybody. So that's what we do. That's what we are. And let me say, it wasn't an easy task. It wasn't. But when you lead with the community voices, how do you go wrong? So thank you.
Well, this is going to be a tough one for the development lawyer. So sorry to bring the room down. I am the man, and I am here to represent that perspective. No. So I'm Megan Rogers. I'm a development lawyer, and one of the really important things that we've heard tonight, right, is, you know, this is the way the system works, right? So we have to work within the system. That's not what we have to do. We have to build things that work for people. We've also talked about willful amnesia, and what I would suggest to you is that we've moved on and we've moved into new ways of finding ways to discriminate against people based upon race and class and socioeconomic background, and we're doing it better than we ever have done before. And we should call those opportunities out and talk about them. And so I'll talk about, in this space, about affordable housing, what it means, and housing stock in the state of Minnesota, and why we need more housing to help address some of these historic problems, where we can create a wealth basis for people to grow generational wealth and preserve existing wealth. So I'm going to start off with my Development 101, my misconceptions and truths. Developers are motivated by profits. Yeah, they absolutely are. They absolutely are motivated by profits, but it's also because people don't have $18 million to build a 62-unit building just sitting around, right? These projects are financed. They come from banks. They come from alternate lending sources. And so the math has to work to build the building, to put it together, and for people to have successful lives within that building. So yes, developers are motivated by profits, but to the end that it means that it's a whole package that has to come and live after it's constructed. So yes, that's true, but also there's reasons for it. Developers don't want to build affordable housing. That just isn't true, especially over the course of the last 4 years. The most significant investment that we've seen in the Twin Cities is people shifting their development, entire platforms to affordable projects. And it's because the policy around affordability has changed, because money has become available for affordable projects, and because people are not doing them the way they used to do them. They're coming up with creative capital arrangements to make these projects work, and also to create home ownership opportunities for people along the way. So that's just not true. Something that Nick hears here all the time in the city of Bloomington, that we hear in city council meetings, wherever I am on a city council meeting night, is that density is bad, right? Like we don't want more housing, that apartment building, those townhomes. Well, I pulled some numbers today. I would suggest to you, first of all, that some of the most expensive neighborhoods in our entire country are the most dense neighborhoods, right? But here in Minnesota, so the median square footage price in the city of Bloomington, citywide, is $198 per square foot. In downtown Wayzata, the median square footage is $598 a square foot. Right? That's the densest area of that city. It is desirable. The market drives it. Density is not bad. Density can be an incredible benefit to a community. Affordable housing is less than. It's an ugly box. We don't like it for our community. The picture behind me is an 100% affordable building in Washington, D.C. that specifically serves women and children coming out of homelessness. This is an extraordinary project that is city-owned property. It's funded through TIF. It's funded from a nonprofit development company. It's gorgeous. Affordable housing is not less than. Affordable housing can be extraordinary in every possible way. Families don't thrive in apartments. I grew up in an apartment. I had my son in a row home. Families do great in apartments. How do we think people live in New York City? Like, I'm so sorry, but like, that's just not a metric that we should be talking about. You know, Tom Brady and Giselle, they had their family in an apartment. So this is a lot of nonsense in terms of like what works and what doesn't work. And then the idea that more housing doesn't change the affordability matrix. It's just not true. The more housing you have, the more diversity in housing stock you create, and the more opportunity that you have for people to get in at all different levels. If we learned anything, so one of the projects that I got to work on here at the City of Bloomington during the pandemic was turning our hotel rooms into housing for people who were previously homeless. And I have the great opportunity to continue to do that work now with a number of cities and a number of hotel providers and nonprofit organizations. Creating space and place for people to rest and recover allowed them to transition into housing. Housing matters at all levels, and more housing of all types impacts the affordability matrix across the board. The other thing, and I know Nick will touch on this, is that losing housing also matters. Naturally occurring affordable housing makes a difference. It's a project in Boston. The two brick buildings on the end are, so naturally occurring affordable housing matters. Maintaining the homes that we have in the community matters. Not having them torn down and used, to build a new McMansion, it makes a difference. And then the other thing is that, converting interesting properties, preserving historical properties for affordability. This is a project in Boston. The two big brick buildings on the end were industrial workshops. They were maintained. They had a historical designation. The buildings in the middle are new construction, but all of this was made possible, and it's all 100% affordable because they utilize green grants, and they also utilize historic tax credits. So being creative with how you fund a project makes a huge difference, and also can really build beautiful things and make your community better. So 2 success stories that I'll call out. 44 Flats, 100% affordable project in Edina, received. The city of Edina has done a lot of work in terms of creating an affordable housing trust fund and a longstanding Edina Housing Foundation. They put a bunch of money into this project, an innovative capital stack, and it had a lot of opposition associated with it. This project was stopped in the middle of construction because the neighborhood said that it was not being built based upon how the plans were approved. We're going to get to why this matters, but keep it in your mind. Like, what did we learn, right? When we were watching the video, and I wrote it down here on this. Oh, yes, exactly right. They read prepared statements. Guess what? They read prepared statements in opposing this project at the city council meeting. They're doing the exact same thing. And then the Hollows in St. Paul. So this building is 62 units. It costs $18.5 million to build. It's on a city-owned lot. It's extremely efficient in terms of what you're building. And it's built by a great Black developer named Johnny Opara. He built this building, and he thought about every single one of these units because his dad and he grew up in affordable housing. And things that are very special about this building are like the doors that they chose for each one of these units are a specific thickness. Because he's like, I remember we always had these really bad doors. You could hear everything through it. They were drafty. And I want to make this project function for people. These need to be livable spaces. But $18.5 million is 62 units of housing. Like, that is a great deal all the way around. So it's possible to do. Now, here's the bad things. Here's the terrible things. So two projects. So the one from Shakopee, I have the pleasure to be working on. It's with Beacon Interfaith. It was previously approved, and we're in the process of putting together the money to build this thing. We have approved plans, and the city attempted to remove the approvals that we received without providing public notice to the developer because they got so much public comment and public feedback about this was going to be bad for the community. It's going to be great for the community. This is a building that is at 60% AMI. A single person qualifies at $52,550 a year. Single person will be living in this building. I'm sorry, but tell me how this is going to be a problem for your community. This is the wages that our community is making out there. And then lastly, I would encourage you to take a look. This is an ongoing saga in Western Edina, friends. Come on. And you know, I'll say that my call to action is when you see an affordable project written up in the Star Tribune and there's an opportunity to show up for the public hearing, show up and speak in favor of the project. This is an 88-unit, 55-plus senior complex that is in its fourth concept plan in front of the city of Edina because the Parkwood Knolls neighborhood has come out actively against it. It has funding from Minnesota Housing. It has bond dollars associated with it. It is paid for. This is 88 units of great housing that fits exactly in its neighborhood. Will not have any impact on these big old homes in Western Edina. But it's people getting up there and saying, reading their prepared statements about what they don't want in their community. And that is exactly what we've seen. That's exactly what redlining did. It's exactly what we see with the racial covenants. It's just new, better, and more hidden. And so this is the opportunity to get out there, to call it out, and to show up at those public meetings in your community at the City of Bloomington. If it ever happens, you better not let it happen, Nick. I'll come for you. And speak in support of these projects. Okay. The other thing is that right now, Minnesotans for More Homes Initiative, there's a big push at the legislature to remove some city authority over single-family zoning, over multifamily zoning, to take out the public hearing, to take out the public battle over whether or not a city has the discretion to deny a project. I'd encourage you to look into that. I have the handouts for it. It's a housing coalition. It's a really interesting project, and definitely something to watch in this legislative session. All right, that's it. I went over.
Thank you, Megan, and all the number of ways I've been called out. No, thank you. I'm Nick Johnson. I'm a senior planner for long-range planning at Bloomington, so thank you for the nice introduction from Daniel. It's really an honor to speak with these people here on this panel. They've done all incredible work. I think what I can maybe offer to the presentation is just ground the context a little bit in terms of what's happening locally here in Bloomington. I would say that just to be on the record and put this issue to bed, urban planners are not superheroes, not even close or even heroes. They're just nerds. So let's just put that debate to end there. But I appreciate the kind words that some of the folks have said, but some of the work that we've been able to do in Bloomington is really a reflection of a collaborative team in community development. And that also does not happen with good elected and appointed officials kind of behind you, directing you. backing you up. Staff can have really aspirational ideas about public policy, but if you don't get that support from the people actually making those decisions, it's really not going to go anywhere. So I just want to make that point. To Daniel's thought about restorative narratives, we've been doing some work here in Bloomington really aimed at kind of restoring different aspects of public policy to increase access to housing and economic opportunity. The urban planning profession has a lot of reflection that it needs to do in terms of some of the harm that it's caused historically in many of these ways. So I just wanted to touch on that restorative theme. I like that. So on to the nerdy stuff in terms of data and what have you. So this is the problem, okay? This is the same slide that Shereese showed you, but this is the Bloomington context, and these numbers have gotten slightly better in the last year or two, but they are dreadful numbers overall. So I don't do that to provide harm, but it's just important that we face down the reality of what we're looking at here in Minnesota and in Bloomington. Bloomington City Council adopted a racial equity business plan. We're required and committed to advancing racial equity here in Bloomington, and one piece of that is trying to eliminate and reduce disparities in access to housing and economic opportunity. So the work that myself and others in our planning department and community development in general, in terms of the public policies that we're working on, is trying to be focused on reducing and eliminating these disparities that exist. So a quick just explainer about Bloomington. Bloomington is definitely the quintessential auto-oriented suburban community here in the Twin Cities. A large portion of the city was platted and developed during the 1950s before the city was incorporated. So there was fairly limited zoning laws at that time when it first was initially being built. And so as you travel around the community from the east side to central to west, kind of being cognizant of the patterns that you see in the built environment in terms of the lot sizes, in terms of kind of how the public right-of-way functions, in terms of the street network and other things. Those are all reflections of public policy that the city intentionally enacted dating back to the 1960s. So in the very tail end of the 1950s, that's when Bloomington adopted a minimum lot size of 11,000 square feet. So that's roughly a quarter of an acre. There's many homes in Bloomington that don't meet that standard on the east side. And so Bloomington, like many cities, went on a campaign of adopting fairly strict zoning regulations in low-density residential areas, many of which are still in our code and we're still working through. So what does that mean? What does that actually look like in the real world? Well, this is a wonderful Bloomington home that currently you could not build. At least as of 2 years ago, you could not build this home. Now you can build this home. The reason that you couldn't build this home before is that it didn't meet minimum floor area requirements. It didn't have enough parking. The lot was too small, both in width and area. And so one of the things we did in recent zoning reform efforts is to make a home like this now viable again. And why is that important? Well, we've all seen kind of recent news about how tight the housing market is and how difficult it is for entry home buyers, first-time home buyers, to secure a home. And I'll show you some numbers here in a minute that speaks to that more. But houses like these, every community needs more houses like this. Beyond just some of the issues we've been talking about tonight, these homes are typically fairly energy efficient. They're great for seniors and 1- and 2-person households. And yes, they are more affordable. So we need to kind of honor and advance more housing like this, not less. These are the numbers I was going to mention. So in the last 4 years, these are assessed values from the city's assessing department. And I circle the bracket under the 300,000 because that's the most significant drop-off in the amount of homes at that value. But in 2019, almost 15,000 homes in Bloomington were valued at less than $300,000, excuse me. In 2023, that has dropped below 4,000. So that gives you an idea in terms of the complete loss of that more affordable housing stock. And what that means for entry-level buyers or buyers who need a more affordable price point is now you are competing over a much more restricted supply of housing than what was previously available in Bloomington. And in other communities, these numbers are much worse, by the way. Bloomington historically was a more affordable community to buy a home in than some of our peer suburban communities. So this is a dynamic that is being seen all over the metro and just really demonstrates how difficult it is to move into home ownership for many people. So kudos to, when I talked about the community development team, Erica Coleman is a big part of that. She's in the audience, teasing me most of the time. But she provided me this graphic, hopefully with what Shereese and Megan and Maria were talking about gives you an idea of how complex the housing ecosystem is in terms of how wicked of a problem it is to kind of turn this super tanker around. And I'm going to be perfectly frank. You can change all the zoning laws you want. If you don't change issues with financing, if you don't change many of these other issues that exist, this problem is not going to resolve itself quickly. Zoning is a bad guy. It's not the only bad guy out there. And so on this housing ecosystem piece, you can see, I know the graphic is very small, so I don't want to strain people's eyes. But basically, that small highlighted part is the zoning piece of it. And so I show this for two reasons. One, to express that it is very complex, that yes, we do need to reform land use policy and we need people engaged on that issue. Do go to the public hearings and tease the city planners about their, yeah, okay. But that's just like one small part of it. There's many other professions and arenas that you all exist in as professionals that can help with this issue in different ways. And so I won't say a call to action, but definitely evaluate like who you know and who has the ability to change policy in areas other than just local land use. I was going to say something else, but I forgot. Megan's used to that. I was going to say, so why else is kind of Bloomington doing this work? We're doing this work because we adopted a strategic plan that was heavily influenced by a wide swath of engagement with residents and community. And this is also an Erica Coleman ripoff. I'm going to give her credit for. The mission that came out of that strategic plan is that Bloomington is striving to cultivate an enduring and remarkable community where people want to be. She artfully said, is it a community where people can be? And that's an ongoing question that we have to keep asking ourselves and when we evaluate our own housing stock and our own housing market. So what does this look like in practice? So by tweaking small rules in your zoning code, this was a map that we prepared for some of these low density zoning reforms. You can basically increase the opportunity for subdivision by splitting lots tenfold by doing these subtle zoning amendments. The same thing for two-family dwellings. We basically, by changing those rules, doubled the opportunity of lots that were available where you could develop a two-family dwelling. And so these things are very important and can be very technical, but they have big impacts on the back end. And then the Bloomington City Council and other leaders in community development very smartly adopted the Opportunity Housing Ordinance back in 2019. This is what are referred to as inclusionary housing policies, where every development over 20 units has to have an affordable component associated with it. Over 2,000 units have been built in Bloomington since its adoption, and all of those projects, but just a short number, but just a few market rate ones, all have affordable units built into them at 50, 60, in some cases 30% AMI level. Those are the hardest units to create and where we have more work to do. But I just want to highlight that those policies, for other cities that don't have those policies, I don't know why you wouldn't adopt that, because it just sets the expectation for the development community out of the gate. What you might be seeing that's not reflected in this is middle housing. That the state legislation that Megan mentioned, we'll touch on middle housing hopefully. But I just want to mention, so it's not just about land use reform. The city's HRA has been doing a lot of incredible work in the services and programming that they're doing as far as education, as far as financial assistance, and actually being active in the development space themselves in partners with people like Shereese. So we're trying to change the rules so that people like Shereese can put more shovels in the ground, not less. So I'm told I got to get out of here. So.
you.
We are nearing time. Of course, you can go. We'll take maybe 15, 20 minutes, running just a bit over time then.
So one of the things I loved about this as we get seated, did you want me at the...
That's okay.
Oh, okay.
We're good.
Do we have enough mics? Oh, wait a minute. I can
Make
step
myself
back
known.
with
I can
these.
share.
Thank you. I was tired, so I just saw one of the things
We didn't
I
practice
really
ahead of time. Sorry.
Well, I love the way that ended, Nick, with this focus on this community. I think, frankly, that's a really interesting thing for, this kind of coalition, this collective to think about going forward is Golden Valley, Minneapolis, Ramsey County, or St. Paul. That hyper-focus is really an interesting way to explore this. So I'm going to move fast, y'all, and we've got some great questions from you. And wanted to start with just, and we can do this quick, whoever wants to respond, a couple related to the covenants themselves, just to kind of increase that understanding. And so one is, how would you explain it? Maybe we can think about this with Bloomington. How would you explain the spatial patterns in the covenants?
Yeah, I'll try and go first, I suppose. A few of them are kind of around larger park areas in Bloomington. Most of them were, I think there's just over 500, or I think there's close to 600 properties, but 500 affected property owners. I think it's there's different ways to splice the data. But most of them were created in the 40s, or recorded in the 40s, that are in Bloomington. And so in terms of the spatial pattern, it was mostly residential that was being platted and developed during that time. Yeah.
I can tag on because I'm a huge nerd on all of this. The timing of when a place was developed will determine a lot about the patterns. But some consistencies we see across the country and across the metro area, where we have a lot of the data already collected, is if it's a desirable place to live, there will be racial covenants, provided it's not too old. There are some places that were developed before racial covenants, like around the lakes in Minneapolis, where they don't have racial covenants because they didn't need them because the properties were already really expensive. But it's around parks, it's near downtowns, it's kind of all the places where you'd see people not wanting affordable housing these days.
Yeah, and that time frame is important as well. Older neighborhoods like in Minneapolis, especially in green line spaces, people think, I live in Tangletown in, South Minneapolis. That must be covenanted, and actually it isn't, just because the houses are so old. That doesn't mean that covenants can't be added into a lot later. Just one more on that, but this question asker also says, what did Golden Valley do wrong to attract so many lawyers to live there? That's awesome. So a couple quick ones, and Megan, maybe you can help. Deeds in Bloomington, are they 100% inventoried at this point? It sounds like, Nick, you do have a good sense of them.
Yes, absolutely. They are 100% inventoried, and I know the city has really engaged to send out postcards, to do some information about how to address this and how to discharge the covenants. And one of the things that we've run into in doing this work is that there's I call it like the admin hurdle, right? You engage with the information, you have the conversation, but then you've got to get it notarized, and you've got to get, if there's two of you on the deed, both of you have to be available, and then you have to go to the law firm, and it's really, oh gosh, we'll do it, at some point in time. But the conversation is the really key part around this, and then the final action. We stand ready certainly to engage in this, and I think we're going to try to work to set up some like park dates where we show up in these neighborhoods and we've got a team of lawyers and we can notarize these documents and have the conversations, because it's a really simple process, but it's also really important to understand how your neighborhood was built and why it was built that way.
This is a complex, but I think important, multi kind of theme question. Housing prices are out of control. How can older homeowners sell their home for a reasonable price that will allow them to support themselves later in life while still providing an affordable price point for young buyers? One of the stories that Maria and I in the Jim Crow of the North Stories, the follow-up series, talked about was the City of Lakes Land Trust and this idea of meeting actual people who happened to be white people who were selling their homes at a loss into the land trust so that they could become affordable, some of whom have that opportunity for affordable housing as well. But just a great restorative narrative on individuals making change. But I don't know, I like also the senior housing. I think, that came up with a couple of you in terms of the importance of housing options for our older residents. But how do you respond to that?
So an interesting program that the city of Edina adopted an inclusionary zoning policy, just like the city of Bloomington, where for every market rate building that's in excess of 20 units, there either has to have a level of affordability or they pay into the housing trust fund. In Edina, there have been a lot of market rate buildings built over the last 5 years, and many developers have elected to pay into that housing trust fund. And so the city is turning around and is giving offers on any home that's valued currently assessed at less than $400,000. And that's one of the ways that the city is engaging to try to hold that price point down, just to your point, Nick, of how those numbers have increased, to try to step in and create spaces to buy homes as is. But I think but with the market that we live in, that's why I think the more opportunity is huge there.
Shereese, yeah.
In Bloomington, you can sell your home to West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust. You can sell your home to Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, or the HRA can consider it, and it will be an action of the HRA board on purchasing the home.
Wow, thank you. Amazing.
Thanks, Erica.
Shereese, I was thinking about you with this, but everyone should respond. This could be kind of a lightning round. But from your perspective, what's the one greatest thing that cities can do to increase access to housing? I mean, we think of the nonprofit sector doing so much of this, maybe too much of this work, but what do you need from cities?
More money. It's that simple. More money. It's expensive to build homes, especially single-family homes nowadays. And we're constantly thinking about sustainability and energy-efficient homes and things like that as well. And that comes with a price tag as well. So I just think, if we can figure this piece out, and get more funding, then we can build more homes. But we're also, Twin Cities Habitat is also thinking about, density as well. So we have our largest development, the Heights on the east side of St. Paul, which would be 150 units. Mixed units as well. So we're going to have affordable housing, some senior housing, and then and also single family housing. That would be twin homes, townhomes. So going up, not going out, going up. So these would be your 3-story townhomes, smaller single family homes because we're thinking about space, but then also twin homes. So, but we need funding. That's funding.
Anyone else want to respond to that? What's the one single greatest thing?
Funding.
I want to respond. I want to give a non-answer, which is cities have to do all the things. You have to do all the things. If you are really good at funding, but you can't get it through the planning commission, then what's the point? So you have to do all the things. And I think, the one thing that stands out the most is you have to be willing to listen to people and believe them about their lives. Because so many of these patterns are so entrenched and they're so heavily informed by dominant culture life experience that it's mind-blowing sometimes to some of the policymakers or the volunteers on our boards and commissions who haven't, because we live in such a segregated society, they haven't had contact with people whose lives are different than theirs, and they don't understand that the things that are being talked about are people's everyday lives and the things that we need to change. So that if we're going to do one thing, start with that, but then do all the things.
Maria, that was another question is how can we effectively engage in these conversations and change what feels like the dominant narrative? I mean, I think there's been a lot of talk of even the public hearing. And let's face it, in this era, in our democracy, that is such a important convening and hopefully safe space, but we got to work to keep it that way. But what are some other ways you all have seen ways to engage in the conversation?
Yeah, I think it has to be a combination of all the ways. So one way is what you're doing here tonight, and this is a great way, and it's a way that the city can bring a larger group of people together. But I've given a talk like I gave today to 3 people. I'm happy to do that. I mean, and it's also very effective when you're talking about opening people's minds to understanding life experiences that they don't have personal experience with. Smaller groups are often better for that. Faith communities are a really great place to have these conversations because you've already convened a group of people who have a shared value system, and they plug this information into that value system, and then they become champions of this work. People, my hope is that we inspire people to do it individually. Like my whole family knows everything about all of planning and zoning, and like none of them knew or cared anything about it. And now I talk to them about it all the time. But my dad happens to be the mayor of Robbinsdale. I'm pretty sure I've changed his mind about a lot of things. So, yeah. Cool. So each one of us has the ability to do that and just do it in every space that you can do it in every way, because each of us receives information differently and has different comfort level talking about it in a different kind of way.
I appreciate this question, and I don't want to shape the context, but I mean, I think it's in the candor of this space that we've created. So I love this conversation. What is the percentage of our property taxes that is going to cost Bloomington residents for the affordable housing types that you're creating? So,
well, if I don't know I can't give you a precise answer to that because all residential uses are not net positive when it comes to the amount of taxation collected. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that actually the most subsidized land use, if you're talking about just land uses, is single-family residential. And the reason being is because multifamily buildings, a lot more taxes are collected for multifamily residential uses than single-family. Now, why is that? Because there's a lot of single-family voters, right, in those systems of taxation. And I don't mean to say that like in a disparaging way. It's just a reality of how most states and cities' tax systems are.
Maria, did you hear this in the years as you were building up the movement in Golden Valley, this kind of question about taxes and support and costing us?
Yeah, I think that kind of underlies a lot of the issues that we're talking about. But what's really fascinating is like when maybe Bloomington is way out ahead of Golden Valley, but when our city council is thinking about or considering a land use proposal, very rarely do they even talk about is this going to be a net positive tax situation. The conversation is just that we're not going first to the finance department to figure out how much money we're going to make. We're talking mostly about who's going to live there, who is it going to serve, how affordable is it going to be, what is it going to look like, all of those kinds of things. And kind of the tax question is after the fact, because primarily the purpose of our government is to serve people. And so I think that's the right focus for us to have. Maybe we could crunch the numbers and create some persuasive arguments, though, to support some of the policies that we've been talking about.
Well, I also think that narrative or that framing kind of assumes that everybody uses all different types of housing throughout the continuum of their life, right? And so, in a way, that's kind of framed in a way that's assumes that you will not benefit or reside in high density or medium density housing at some point in your life. We all need different types of housing to serve different types of families and age people throughout the course of our life. So, I don't know.
So, I really appreciate this collective again. Just the folks at this DIAS that's what's required. I was wondering if each of you could say a little bit about that idea of partnerships and collaboration across sectors in this work.
I appreciate all the relationships that I have with my colleagues and the appointed and elected officials in Bloomington, but I would say that getting to know the development community a little bit better has been, I liked. I was at a different event, and one of the people let off with the developers are people too, because they kind of are like this very maligned character in like popular culture, right? Is like greedy and very damaging. But anyway, yeah. So I appreciate those partnerships and people like Shereese and I don't get to interact with them as much as some of our other divisions in community development, but the work that they're doing is very inspiring.
Well, I think it's impossible to do any of this work without coalition. I have learned so much from the coalition of folks that we work with at Just Deeds, the realtors, Lyndon and all his folks. And like this panel, like I probably will call each of you and be like, hey, can I have that slide? Because I want to have our planning department make that crunch the numbers for us. Because that's how you make change. That's how you transform narratives. Is you learn from other people's perspectives and you incorporate it into the spaces you're in. And I happen to be a person who's in a space with a lot of people who give legal advice to cities, and there aren't a lot of people who give legal advice to cities who are as nerdy as I am on these topics. And so I just am the one who's always saying it. And so what I get from this coalition is learning all the things and then saying all the things in the rooms that I'm in.
Yeah. I would echo all of that. I was pretty intentional when I joined Habitat that I knew this work couldn't get done without partnerships and more strategic partnerships, launching employer initiatives and things like that, because there's a workforce that we need to tap into. But there's also an opportunity to build champions and allies in those spaces too. So these are all partnerships. The work that Daniel did and Dr. Delegar did really was how it got started. Mm-hmm. Let's just be very clear. I was able to put that what to the how now. Mm. We know what it is. Now this is how we can undo some of that. And that was really driven by strategic partnerships, bringing people in to talk about this. It can't just be my voice. I have to have multiple voices and people who understand what is going on. And those intersections are so critical. Identifying what that is. Don't even get me going into the criminal justice system. Like, that's contributing to this too. I don't have enough time. But I'm building allies in those spaces too, right? So I have to think about every single partner and the intersection of this work to really explain to them what the how, what the why is. Because we don't always know. So that's what I've been trying to do. And it seems to be working because I didn't know a lot of these folks until recently. I'm like, oh my God, we're all speaking the same language. And that's how you transform communities. Yeah. When you're speaking the same language, you understand what is happening, and we're putting our brains together to figure out, well, how do we undo that? Yeah. So, yeah.
So I grew up as a land use and development lawyer in Florida, and we didn't have anything built, right? Or if we had it built, it was like a strip mall. We could tear it down. It's no big deal. But in the communities that I worked in, we were working in partnership with the community to build something new. And we weren't trying to rework the old. We were trying to figure out how to raise tax dollars so that they could have public infrastructure, that they could make their water cleaner, and that we could also build the things that we wanted to build to give people's homes and to build shopping malls and do things like that. And I think it's one of the things that we really are lacking here in the Twin Cities and in our culture from the development side and from the city side, is that when we can sit down and come together and put together the project that works from a finance perspective, that works from an architectural perspective, and then also speaks to the city's needs and to the community's needs. Like let's all get together and talk about it instead of fighting each other in public hearings or suing each other. We don't get the best results from that at all. And in that conversation, hopefully we can have. We can change the way that people look at affordable housing. We can change the sort of narrative around it. And it sucks to sit in those rooms and to hear those statements about a project that you know is going to bring good things to a community. But it's important. But the more that we all can engage together on the front end, I think we end up changing the overall culture, and that's necessary.
Oh, amazing and inspiring. So restorative narratives are hard truths, they're universal truths. It's a sustained inquiry. It shows a meaningful progression, and it's authentic and strength-based. And that's what this was tonight, y'all. This was really great. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your questions in the conversation, but thank you.
So incredible. Really wonderful to see so many new faces, make more new connections. It seems like that's the critical thing here. I'm still relatively new to the city and community, and it seems like the train's come a long way. There's a lot of very special people in it as I've peered inside and joined some of the journey, and there's much more room on the train, it seems. So very excited that this went down. We had a great attendance. People seem very... well, I learned so much. I'll speak for myself. So I just want to thank so many people helped bring this together. Our panelists, who you've now learned a lot more about, really special people doing really special work. The Human Rights Commission, thank you so much. We're also rolling the credits here. The Human Rights Commission, Larkin, Hoffman, got to meet Megan and Jake out there. Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity got to make a great connection with Preston here. Normandale Community College, we had a special sponsor there in the back, Corey Crowder, the Associate Vice President of Equity and Inclusion at Normandale Community College. Kayla Dvorak-Feld did so much work to bring this together, our office support specialists and community outreach and engagement. Amanda Crombie on our team as well. Erica Coleman, thank you so much. You had all the idea for all the panelists. They showed up. The administrator of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, Anita Smithson, Stephanie Wiersma, good work on the questions there and all the other work, of course, you do. Heather Camison, Human Rights Commission, and Normandale Community College. Council Member D'Alessandro, thank you so much. Diane Kirby, Community Service Director, I'm naming great job. Thanks for employing me. Do you care about housing? Remove your covenant if you have one. Tell your neighbor about the story you heard tonight, the stories you heard tonight. This event was recorded. There's a lot on the internet that you can keep digging into as you've learned tonight. And then you could join the Housing and Redevelopment Authority Board if you want to think about that in the future. You could join the Planning Commission. You could join the Sustainability Commission. You could join Creative Placemaking. You could join the Human Rights Commission in the future if you'd like to. So many calls to action. Pick your journey. Thank you for being here tonight.